Today we're uncovering the incredible story of a woman who shattered every expectation of her time. She wasn't just a widow, a mother, or a ruler, she was a force of nature, a strategist, and a master of vengeance. Princess Olga of Kiev wasn't someone to be crossed, and those who did paid the ultimate price. Born into a brutal era of warlords and shifting alliances, Olga's rise to power was anything but conventional. After her husband, Prince Igor, was murdered in cold blood, many expected her to fade into the shadows. Instead, she orchestrated one of the most legendary revenge campaigns in history, one that left entire cities in ruins. But Olga's story doesn't end in bloodshed. She would go on to transform not just her own destiny, but the fate of an entire nation, paving the way for the Christianization of Kievan Rus. So who was the real Olga of Kiev? A ruthless avenger? A visionary leader? A saint with a dark past? Let's unravel the truth behind one of the most formidable women of the Middle Ages. Before we dive into Olga's incredible tale, let's take a moment to understand the world she was born into, because it was anything but peaceful. In the early Middle Ages, the land that would become known as Kievan Rus was a volatile, ever-shifting battleground. A federation of Slavic tribes ruled by Scandinavian Vikings known as the Varangians. This emerging state was shaped by conquest, commerce, and bloodshed. Legendary figures like Rurik and Oleg carved out a powerful kingdom, centering their rule in Kiev, the heart of what is now Ukraine. The Rus were not just warriors, they were traders, explorers, and empire builders, their influence stretching from the icy shores of the Baltic Sea to the bustling trade routes of the Black Sea. But this was a land of constant peril. The Kievan Rus of the 10th century was surrounded by enemies. Nomadic raiders from the east, ambitious warlords within, and rival factions vying for control meant that survival wasn't just about strength, it was about strategy, resilience, and the willingness to strike before being struck. And in this unforgiving world, Olga of Kiev would rise, a woman who would redefine what it meant to be powerful. She wasn't born into peace. She wasn't handed power. She took it, and history would never forget her name. Olga's early life is wrapped in mystery, lost in the shadows of history. Who was she before she became a queen, a ruler, and a legend? We may never know for sure. Most historians believe she was born into a noble Varangian family, part of the Scandinavian warrior elite that had come to dominate the Slavic lands. Whether she was raised in the halls of a chieftain or the bustling trade centers of the Rus, one thing is certain: she was destined for power. Her fate was sealed when she married Prince Igor of Kiev, the powerful descendant of Rurik, the dynasty's legendary founder. Together, they ruled over the expanding Kievan Rus, a kingdom that was growing in strength but also teetering on the edge of constant conflict. Igor's reign was one of war, conquest, and crushing tributes forced upon neighboring tribes. But power built on fear is fragile. It wasn't long before his enemies saw an opportunity. And when they struck, they made one fatal mistake. They left his wife alive. In the year 945, greed sealed Prince Igor's fate. Despite already collecting tribute from the Drevlians, a powerful Slavic tribe, Igor wanted more. He returned to demand extra payment, an arrogant mistake that would cost him his life. The Drevlians had tolerated his rule long enough. This time they decided to send a message. They captured the Viking prince and devised a punishment so gruesome it would be spoken of in hushed tones for generations. Igor was tied to 2 bent birch trees. Then, with a single command, the trees were released, ripping his body apart in an instant. The once mighty ruler of Kiev was reduced to nothing more than a cautionary tale. But this wasn't the end of the story. For Olga, it was just the beginning. With her husband dead and her young son, Sviatoslav, far too young to rule, power should have slipped from her grasp. The Drevlians certainly thought so. Believing they could manipulate the grieving widow, they sent a delegation to Kiev with the proposal Olga should marry their prince, Mal. If she accepted, the Drevlians would unite their lands, ensuring stability. But they had no idea who they were dealing with. Olga welcomed the envoys with a warm smile and then had them buried alive. That was just the first move in a revenge campaign so brutal it would make history tremble. Olga's revenge against the Drevlians wasn't just brutal, it was legendary. Burying the first delegation alive was only the beginning. The Drevlians had underestimated her once, and she would make sure they never made that mistake again. Shortly after, she sent word to the Drevlians, expressing her regret for the hasty execution of their envoys. She claimed she was now open to peace and invited a second delegation to Kiev to negotiate. The messengers arrived, relieved that the widow seemed ready to put the past behind her. She welcomed them warmly, offering them a gift, a luxurious bath to cleanse themselves after their long journey. The envoys, expecting hospitality, eagerly entered the grand bathhouse. But the moment they stepped inside, the doors were bolted shut. Olga's men set the building ablaze, turning it into a furnace. Not a single Drevlian made it out alive. 2 delegations down, and Olga was just getting started. Next, she sent a message to the Drevlians, claiming she was finally ready to accept their proposal. She asked them to prepare a grand funeral feast in honor of her late husband, Prince Igor, in their capital city, Iskorostan. The Drevlians, unaware of the horror she had already unleashed, agreed. When Olga arrived, the city welcomed her with open arms. At the banquet, her hosts raised their cups in a toast, and Olga's men ensured the mead never stopped flowing. The Drevlians drank and drank, celebrating what they thought was the dawn of a new alliance. But when the room was spinning and their limbs grew heavy, Olga gave the signal. Her soldiers stormed the hall and unleashed a massacre. That night, 5,000 Drevlians were slaughtered where they sat, their drunken laughter turning into screams. Yet even this wasn't enough. Olga wanted total annihilation. With her army at her back, she marched on Iskorostan, laying siege to the city for an entire year. The once confident Drevlians, now starving and desperate, finally surrendered. They begged for peace, willing to give her anything she desired. Olga's demand seemed almost merciful, a simple tribute, 3 pigeons and 3 sparrows from each household. The Drevlians, eager to end the bloodshed, complied without hesitation. But they had no idea they were handing her the very weapons that would destroy them. That night, Olga's soldiers tied small pouches of sulfur and cloth to the legs of each bird and set them ablaze. When the terrified creatures were released, they instinctively flew back to their nests under rooftops, inside barns, within the city's wooden walls. Within moments, Iskorostan was an inferno. Flames erupted in every corner of the city, spreading faster than anyone could contain them. Houses collapsed, people fled in terror, and the once great Drevlian capital burned to the ground. There was no escape. Those who survived the fire were cut down by Olga's forces. Her revenge was complete. But this was no mindless rampage. This was a calculated, merciless display of power, one that ensured no one would ever dare challenge Olga of Kiev again. With her rule secured and her enemies annihilated, Olga turned her focus to something far greater: diplomacy. Her ambition stretched beyond the battlefields of Kievan Rus. She set her sights on Constantinople, the magnificent capital of the Byzantine Empire. A city of golden domes, impenetrable walls, and a ruler who believed himself to be the most powerful man in the world, Emperor Constantine VII. When Olga arrived, she wasn't just another barbarian ruler seeking trade or alliances. She was a queen, a conqueror, and, most importantly, a master strategist. The emperor was captivated by her intelligence, her presence, and her sheer audacity. Intrigued, Constantine made an offer that would have elevated Olga to the highest ranks of Byzantine society. He proposed marriage. But Olga, as always, was 10 steps ahead. She played along, expressing interest, but with one condition: before she could marry the emperor, she wished to be baptized into Christianity. The Byzantine court rejoiced. Bringing a powerful foreign ruler into the Christian fold was a diplomatic victory. And so, in an elaborate ceremony, Olga was baptized, taking the Christian name Helena. The emperor himself served as her godfather, solidifying their spiritual bond. Then, just as Constantine prepared to make her his bride, Olga delivered her final, devastating move. "You are my godfather," she reminded him with a knowing smile. In Byzantine tradition, such a relationship was sacred. A godfather could never marry his goddaughter. The emperor had been outmaneuvered. He had played right into her hands. Olga left Constantinople not as a bride, but as a queen enriched with lavish gifts, valuable trade agreements, and most importantly, no obligations. Back in Kiev, she was determined to spread her newfound faith among her people. But here she faced her greatest obstacle yet: her own son, Sviatoslav. A fierce warrior and a devout pagan, he refused to abandon the gods of his ancestors, fearing that embracing Christianity would weaken his rule. Despite this setback, Olga had already planted the seed of change. And while she wouldn't live to see it bloom, her grandson, Vladimir the Great, would one day complete what she had started, ushering in the Christianization of the Rus, and forever altering the course of history. But make no mistake, it was Olga who lit the first spark. In her later years, Olga traded the fire of vengeance for the wisdom of governance. Her reign brought stability to Kievan Rus, turning it from a land of constant strife into a thriving power. Under her rule, trade flourished, cities grew, and her people prospered. But even in peace, dangers lurked. One of the greatest threats came from the Pechenegs, a fierce nomadic tribe known for their brutal raids. When they laid siege to Kiev, chaos gripped the city. Supplies dwindled, fear spread, and it seemed that Olga's hard-won empire might fall. But Olga was no stranger to desperate situations. She devised a plan as cunning as any battlefield maneuver. Realizing that reinforcements were the city's only hope, she orchestrated a daring escape for a lone messenger. Under the cover of night, he slipped past the enemy lines, carrying a plea for aid. Days passed. The Pechenegs tightened their grip, certain that victory was near. Then, like a storm breaking over the horizon, reinforcements arrived. The Rus forces struck with devastating precision, driving the Pechenegs back and securing Kiev once more. Even in old age, Olga remained unbreakable. By the time of her death in 969, she had transformed Kievan Rus into a formidable state, one that could no longer be ignored by the great powers of the world. Her people mourned not just a ruler, but a legend. And though her own son, Sviatoslav, clung to the old gods, her true legacy would be carried by her grandson, Vladimir the Great. It was he who would complete the mission she had started, bringing Christianity to the Rus and cementing their place in history. But none of it would have been possible without Olga, the woman who defied expectations, outwitted emperors, and turned vengeance into empire. Olga's story is a mesmerizing blend of history and legend, one that forces us to confront the true nature of power. Was she a ruthless avenger, a brilliant strategist, or something far more complex? Perhaps that's why her legacy endures, because she defies simple definitions. In 1547, she was canonized as Saint Olga, earning the rare and prestigious title of equal to the apostles for her role in introducing Christianity to the Rus. She became a symbol of faith, transformation, and resilience, a woman who defied her time and reshaped history. But history has two faces, and Olga's is no exception. Her revenge against the Drevlians was cold, calculated, and merciless. It was the kind of brutality that would terrify even the most hardened rulers. Yet for Olga, it wasn't just about vengeance, it was about survival, control, and securing a future for her people. So here's the real question: was Olga a hero, a villain, or something far more intriguing, someone who existed in the shadows between the two? What do you think? Was her brutality justified, or was she simply another ruthless ruler consumed by power? Let me know in the comments below. Olga's story is a powerful reminder that history is rarely black and white. It's a tangled web of fact and legend, where the most unforgettable figures are the ones who refuse to fit neatly into one box. Was she a saint or a ruthless strategist? A bringer of faith or an architect of destruction? The truth is, she was all of these things, and that's what makes her story so fascinating. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the life of Princess Olga of Kiev, don't forget to hit that like button, share this video, and subscribe for more incredible stories from history's most intriguing figures. Thanks for watching, and until next time, stay curious,